Raptors head coach Nick Nurse just did something that nobody expected. With his core 5 starters all available to play, he had Gary Trent Jr. and Scottie Barnes come off the bench against the Cleveland Cavaliers. But it may have worked so well that fans actually wanted to continue doing this going forward. Let's get into it. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Amateur Hour Sports, your source for the greatest coverage and analysis on the latest Toronto Raptors news. If you like what you see from today's video, then make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Help me on my road to 13,000 subs. And if you find yourself enjoying this video along the way, be sure to drop a like to give the extra bit of support to the channel. Help us reach some new viewers. But our video today, the Raptors in their win against the Cleveland Cavaliers yesterday, they employed something that was very, very unexpected here. With all 5 usual stars available in Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., Scottie Barnes, and finally having Pascal Siakam return from injury, Nick Nurse made the shocking decision to start Gary Trent Jr. and Scottie Barnes on the bench, which means Juancho, Hernangomez, and Thaddeus got the start for the team as the Raptors beat the Cleveland Cavaliers 100-88. Now, admittedly, the Cavaliers were missing Jarrett Allen and Kevin Love for this one, but that was still a good team that the Cavaliers put out there, and the Raptors, maybe as a result of using these new lineup strategies, made them look like a really, really bad team here. They kept the Cavaliers not just under 100 points, but under 99 points, and a big part of that was OG Anunoby playing lockdown defense on Donovan Mitchell, a player who has routinely been scoring 30 points this season. He only had 8 points on 3 for 11 shooting. That was the first time in 121 games Donovan Mitchell failed to put up at least 10 points. It's because of the DPOY frontrunner. But that is not the focus of this video. The focus of this video is the new lineup strategy that Nick Nurse employed for this one. So we saw probably about half an hour before the game began. We didn't have the starting lineup just yet. We saw the starting lineup about half an hour before, and it was revealed that Gary Trent Jr. and Scottie Barnes were not going to be available. So I was wondering, okay, apparently they're supposed to be back from injury. Pascal Siakam, thankfully, is finally back, and my goodness, did he look good in that first half against the Cavaliers. But where are Gary Trent Jr. and Scottie Barnes? And it was revealed shortly after that they were actually going to be playing from the bench in this one, which really had Raptors fans thinking, what was the purpose of the decision? What was the cause of this decision? And Nick Nurse spoke in a press conference apparently before the game talking about how a lot of guys have been injured, so this is just a way for him to ease players back into action. And okay, maybe, but to me that doesn't really make a lot of sense here because Scottie Barnes hasn't missed much time, neither has Gary Trent Jr. The player that's been missing time has been Pascal Siakam, and he played 30 minutes and got a ton of minutes in the first half and played really, really well. He was 7 for 10 with 17 points in the first half. Quieted down in the second half, though he was still affecting the game, but I think he took his foot off the gas in his first game back from that lengthy injury here. He had the most severe injury, and he had the longest injury, and he still got a good amount of minutes. It was a close game. He probably would have gotten even more minutes as well, so I don't know if I really believe that here. So it got me thinking even more as to what was the actual purpose of this decision to bring Gary Trent Jr. and Scottie Barnes off the bench, but instead of thinking too in-depth on this situation, maybe I just need to make it a lot more simple here. Gary Trent Jr. and Scottie Barnes, it is no secret that the two players have been struggling this season. In fact, over the last 2 weeks on this channel specifically, I've made single videos dedicated to each of those players talking about their struggles, what's been going wrong, and how they can overcome it. And Juancho, Hernangomez, and Thaddeus in these last 2 weeks when the Raptors have been dealing with this injury crisis have really stepped up and been really good players, helping this team win games. 2 players that haven't really been helping us win games have been Scottie Barnes and Gary Trent Jr. for much of the season, specifically more so Gary Trent Jr., who I've been advocating for a good amount of time now, especially in the offseason, that Gary Trent Jr. should be a player coming off the bench playing that sort of 6-man role. And in this game, we saw him not really as a 6-man, but playing off the bench in a role there, as we saw with Scottie Barnes. And you know what? Juancho, Hernangomez, and Thaddeus have been playing so well here that maybe they just deserve the spot in the starting 5. And Nick Nurse is sending a message here that even though it seems like the starting 5 picks itself with the Raptors, Nick Nurse never deviates away from his starting 5 when guys are healthy. But perhaps in this situation, Nurse sends a message to the players that your starting spot, your role with this team, it is not guaranteed, and you have to earn those positions. And guess what? Thaddeus Young and Juancho Hernangomez have been earning those positions. They've been fine with this team. They've been complementing some of the key pieces like OG Anunoby and Fred VanVleet really, really well. They can affect the game without the ball, and they affect the game really well defensively, something that Gary Trent Jr. hasn't been doing, and I would say, maybe Scottie Barnes hasn't quite been doing this season. So we saw a new approach from the Raptors here, and you know what? It really, really worked here. Whatever the reason was for Nick Nurse going to this new strategy, this new starting lineup, whether it was injuries, whether it was sending a message to his players they need to be better on court, or whether it was just him identifying that this was a strategy that he wanted to experiment with in this game, whatever the reason was, this worked for the Raptors. And there are a variety of reasons why this worked for the team. First of all, for the starting five that now was VanVleet, Anunoby, Siakam, along with Hernangomez and Thaddeus Young, you had two off-ball players who were comfortable being off-ball players that really just gave the reins and allowed players like Siakam to really express himself in the first half, as I mentioned, where he was so great. And then for OG Anunoby to take more of the reins in the second half and really be a dominant offensive player along with playing Defensive Player of the Year style defense there. Fred VanVleet, it wasn't quite his night from a shooting department, but at plus 24, he was the best in the plus-minus category for the Raptors throughout this game. And you know what? To me, he also had a quite good game here, despite the shooting maybe not quite being there again. I mean, he had some really good plays to go along with it, but in any sense, those two, Hernangomez and Thaddeus Young, played their roles, complimented the team, allowed maybe the bigger players to just take on a bigger role. That worked for the starting five. And where we've had issues has been our bench, but we didn't have issues with our bench as much yesterday because the bench now features Scottie Barnes and Gary Trent Jr., two very talented players who I thought were much better yesterday than normal. It wasn't a stat sheet stuffer for Scottie Barnes necessarily in terms of what you've come to expect from him, but it was a big step in the right direction, and I thought that having Scottie Barnes coming off the bench gave him a lot more of the offensive load in terms of ball handling and playmaking and kind of getting back to his roots. He's always identified himself as a point guard. That's where he played in his college season with Florida State, where the Raptors drafted him out of, where he won the Sixth Man of the Year award, and I just felt he looked a little bit more free and a little bit more comfortable. The confidence side of things, some things still quite aren't there, like his finishing under the rim, those layups where he's going in a little bit soft, needs to go in a little bit more tougher and aggressively to get those finishes, but nonetheless, an improved game for Barnes. Gary Trent Jr. shot 4 for 9 with 14 points. That's not eye-popping, but you know what? That's better than we've gotten from Gary Trent Jr. in recent weeks here, and he added in 7 rebounds, something that you usually don't see from the shooting guard. So I like that. Chris Boucher was a factor off the bench slightly, has been better in the last couple of weeks. Really didn't showcase it on the statistical part of it, but he's an exceptional player to have coming off your bench consistently, so he adds on to it. Koloko got some minutes off the bench. Kem Birch got some minutes off the bench here. And overall, what this new strategy allowed us to do with these different players in different roles was to have more of a consistency amongst the 48 minutes here. That Raptors game was just so fun to watch, and again, it just felt like the entire 48 minutes, the Raptors were completely in control of this game. Again, no Jared Allen, no Kevin Love for the Cleveland Cavaliers, and that certainly is a factor, but this is still a pretty good team without those guys. Sure, the Raptors were favored, but they imposed their will and imposed their dominance against this Cavs team, again, the entire 48 minutes. And I think just because you have the starting five where there is the talent there, then you can go to the bench where there is still further talent there for the Raptors to utilize and actually continue to execute their game plan. I've had a lot of complaints for the bench this season. I think one of the key reasons why is that all of the players coming off of their bench are complementary players, and really, they're talented players. There's good players in this Raptors bench, but I feel like most of them are just complementary players with no player to complement because they're just all trying to complement somebody else. But having them distributed like this just seemed to really ignite some of the technically lesser players that are on this roster that are getting minutes consistently here. So I enjoyed what I saw thoroughly, and I think anybody who watched this game would also agree this was something that they enjoyed thoroughly from this team. So now the question becomes, is this something the Raptors can legitimately use going forward? Well, as far as the game went yesterday, it went so well. Don't fix what ain't broke here. I'd just continue to roll with that in the next game. We have 2 tough games coming up this week against the New Orleans Pelicans at New Orleans and against the Brooklyn Nets at Brooklyn. So 2 tougher games here. It worked so well yesterday. Why not continue to experiment tomorrow against the Pelicans? They have some not so great defense on that team. maybe you can find a way to expose him by having consistent offensive talent coming through in the entire 48 minutes with the difference in minutes distribution here. Again, I don't know if this is something that I see viable long-term or continuing to work here. And granted, this is only a one-game sample size, which we can't really draw a ton of conclusions from it. Like, we have to be honest with ourselves here, but it worked. Let's just continue to experiment with here against the Pelicans and the Nets and see if it's going to continue to work here. As far as Nick Nurse making that decision, I feel like it's more so 50-50. It was going to continue to roll with it, but he had to have liked what he saw from the minutes distribution. And you know what? Whether it is easing guys back in from injury, whether it is just sending a message to those players, whether it is maybe he just saw something from a planning standpoint that worked out against the Cavs here, it just, whatever happened, it worked. Maybe he can just take some of the notes from this and add it into the usual starting five here. But ultimately, like, if it works, just continue to roll with it, as I mentioned. Now, on our live stream yesterday, I do a live stream, by the way, watch parties for every single Raptors game. If you want to check those out, we'll be live 30 minutes before the game tomorrow. In the live stream, one of the chatters mentioned that this could cause some ego problems if you went with this going forward because, Gary Trent Jr. is in a contract year. He doesn't want to be coming off the bench. Scottie Barnes won Rookie of the Year last season. He doesn't want to be coming off of the bench this season, no doubt. But, I mean, it's pretty simple. If you don't like it, play better. You only have yourself to blame here because you know what? In the midst of that injury crisis for the Raptors, where we had to go deep into our roster, Thaddeus Young had a DNP earlier on in the season, and he played so well that he's just been starting games, and he continued to start yesterday. Juancho Hernangomez had a catalog of did not plays earlier on in the season, but he's played so well in the limited role that he's just consistently upgraded his minutes to the point where now he's starting games for the Raptors. And you know what? You have to say that it's not as much on Barnes and Trent not being good. It's been Thaddeus Young and Juancho Hernangomez have earned these positions in the starting five. So Nick Nurse perhaps rewarding them for that good play. And you know what? Again, if you have an issue with it as Gary Trent or Scottie Barnes, look at yourself. You have to be better on the court. You don't see Fred VanVleet coming off the bench, and I don't think you ever will. You won't see OG Anunoby or Pascal Siakam coming off the bench, because they have earned those starting roles and are continuing to earn those starting roles on a daily basis. So reality is, it worked. Let's continue to roll with it. The Raptors not only keep the Cavaliers to under 100 points, but to under 90 points in this one. The consistent flow of offense was very interesting. You don't like it, you want more minutes, you play better. And proven fact that you'll get minutes if you're playing well is Juancho and Thaddeus Young. So that wraps it up for me on Amateur Sports. Make sure you've dropped a like on the video if you did enjoy along the way, and make sure you are subscribed for the greatest coverage and analysis on the latest Toronto Raptors news. I'll see you tomorrow for the watch party as the Raptors take on the Pelicans. Let's grab another win and move to 3 games above 500.